In February 2012, the last known veteran of World War I passed away. Now, at the time, it was a solemn but noteworthy event. The last living witness to a war that killed 20 million people was no longer with us. Whatever stories, insights, or experiences those men and women might have had, they were all now lost to history. And as a lifelong history buff, that news hit me a lot harder than most. Whenever we lose those who've lived history, we're just stuck with whatever testaments they've left behind, if any at all. That means there will always be gaps in the full story of humanity. Sure, we do have plenty of documentation of major events, but there can never be any more personal experiences, free from bias, filters, or edits. It's tragic, but unavoidable. And when it comes to veterans from war, those experiences can be much harder to recount. Those who've endured the horrors of war often avoid recalling it, choosing instead to bury it in memories that inevitably die with them. Being a former Army man myself, and having seen some war zones in my deployments, I can totally understand that sentiment. But I also believe that some of those stories should be told. They shouldn't be lost in the memories of soldiers. As traumatic as they might be, we need to document and preserve them somehow. Because if we collectively forget the horrors of war, then what incentive do we have to avoid it in the future? This became my passion and my career after I got out of the military. I traveled, connected, and reconnected with veterans across generations, from the muddy trenches of World War I to the active war zones in the Middle East going on today. I worked to compile their stories, capture their experiences, and preserve the memory of what they endured. And yeah, it can be a harrowing task, and not just because some of their experiences can be triggering, especially to other veterans. But it's worth doing. It needs doing. That's what I've been telling myself for years now, and I didn't used to question that. But recently, I suddenly find myself wondering, maybe certain parts of our history should die with those who experienced it. And by trying to preserve it, I'm sorry, but this is where words fail me. And that has been happening a lot lately. It's been a strain on my mind, my body, and soul, so much so that I'm not even sure my sanity is fully intact anymore. But, assuming I am still sane, assuming I'm not as disturbed as 4 different doctors have told me, I'm choosing to share what I experienced. Doing so may or may not make things much worse, but since I've long since crossed the point of no return, it might not make a difference. Confused yet? Yeah, I don't blame you. Doubting my credibility as well as my sanity? Join the club. It goes around the block. But I promise it'll make some sense soon enough. This story, it's only partially my story. I actually only became part of it towards what should have been the end. 6 weeks ago, I was in Germany on a business trip. A nonprofit veterans group sent me there to research some newly uncovered records from World War II. An old contingent of British, French, and American soldiers had stashed some documents and materials in an old bank vault. And that vault had been buried underground for decades. It was only uncovered after some developer ignored a bunch of local zoning laws and tried to build a bigger office park. That discovery did make the local news. The developer also got arrested, but a team of researchers and contractors came in to fully dig up the vault. It was challenging, but near as I can tell, they followed the usual procedures for dealing with wartime sites. The hope was that they might find some hidden treasure or something. But when they opened the vault, they didn't find any gold or exotic artifacts. They just found a large cache of sealed documents. After that, the media largely lost interest. But I certainly didn't. That was why I was sent to review and preserve the materials. The vault itself was scheduled to be cleaned out and dismantled by the end of the month. As for those records themselves, well, this is where things got a lot less typical. Now, I confirm they were definitely authentic. They were completely consistent with World War II era record keeping. But these documents, for some reason, were not associated with any official operation, Allied or Axis. And there was a reason for that. A damn good one, it turns out. I was just there to help the local historians, especially those who didn't speak English and German as fluently as I did. They were largely interested in just preserving the documents before sending them off to official archives. There were just so many materials, and few had time to actually go over them. But me, being the curious history buff I was, I just couldn't resist. Now, those first batch of documents were mostly standard, consisting of field reports, daily operations, and other generic military activities. Collectively, they documented the various missions associated with the Dark Moon Unit. That wasn't an official name, that's just what they called themselves. In essence, they were a collection of special forces operatives from multiple countries, and they were tasked with going behind enemy lines and disrupting secret operations. Think nuclear programs, advanced weapons research, that sort of thing. But trust me, it's not as cinematic as it sounds. Whatever you're picturing, I promise, it rarely mirrors what you see in war movies. It's usually a lot more mundane and tactical. But in this rare case, I don't know. I don't think any movie could do justice to what these files documented. You see, this Dark Moon Unit had been tasked with uncovering Project Phantom Cold, a very secret, very sensitive joint project between the Germans, the Japanese, and a few other groups that went unnamed. According to the early reports, the project involved the occult, which wasn't too surprising. It is well documented that the German High Command had a keen interest in the occult. They believed it to be instrumental in furthering their efforts to remake the world in their image. But in most cases, it was pure pseudoscientific junk. But Project Phantom Cold was very different. Both British and French intelligence had reported strange, unnatural phenomena in a small Bavarian town. And by late 1944, the phenomena intensified, so much so that the Allied High Command took notice. Unlike other occult projects, this one appeared to be costing lives. Within the span of just a few months, the civilians around the town started dying in droves. And the spies sent to investigate, they died too, and under mysterious circumstances. So many spies had been lost that the Dark Moon Unit had been authorized to raze the whole town if they had to. I honestly wish I knew what those men were thinking when they did what they did. Because according to the reports, nothing went according to plan. When they first arrived at this Bavarian town, it was the dead of night, and an early winter storm was about to roll in. They all described the town as distressingly quiet. The people there seemed to know there was some sort of military project going on nearby. They also knew the war was raging around them, and Germany was losing. But even with the Dark Moon Unit disguised as civilians, they were afraid to leave their homes. One soldier described them as petrified children who flinched at the sight of their own shadow. From old men to young children, these people were living in fear, but not the usual fear associated with the horrors of war. After less than a day in the village, the unit learned more about the string of strange deaths that the intel had reported. There were no pictures, just descriptions. Graphic, disturbing descriptions. They recount civilians being overwhelmed by bitter, bone-chilling cold, sometimes in their beds, and sometimes in broad daylight. Then they fall to the ground, look up and just die. Their expressions frozen in a state of horrified agony. One partially redacted report even mentioned something about a mass grave, full of these frozen, petrified corpses. The ones who buried them were understandably traumatized. They even claimed some spirit or ghost was haunting them, attacking them from beyond, claiming their lives with deathly cold. There were some other strange ramblings in German, but even the fluent German speakers within the team couldn't make sense of them. The next 2 days of reports gave similar accounts and details, but on the third day, the day when they were tasked with infiltrating Project Phantom Cold, that's where the details get a lot more scarce. They clearly knew where the facility was located. An old Bavarian manor, thought to be owned by a German aristocrat who'd gone mad, was converted into a research facility. The unit scouted the facility from afar. There was definitely a lot of activity going on, complete with regular patrols as well as units from the SS. That meant this place was important. It also meant destroying it was a much higher priority. The reports clearly stated that the Dark Moon Unit had planned to break into the facility, destroy whatever they were researching, and leave before the sun rose the next morning. But the extent of that plan, it was never documented. Because before the day of the operation, the files just ended. It was though the last round of field reports had been removed. The last file I could find just says the operation was a success, the Dark Moon unit suffered multiple casualties, and Project Phantom Cold was officially shut down. Now, I wish that's where the story ended. And for everyone else involved in that trip, it was. They had cleaned out the vault, the files were sealed and locked away, and they were sent to a British military facility that I was not authorized to know about. But I just couldn't let it go. I had to know what happened at that manor. I had to know what the Dark Moon unit uncovered. That led me to extend my stay in Germany. I may have lied about a number of things to the nonprofit, telling them I had other archives to research. But in truth, I spent the next several days meeting with every veterans group and history archive I could find. Initially, none could recount any operation involving the Dark Moon unit. There are also no records of something like Project Phantom Cold. I tried to ask what few veterans remained, as well as their families, but I kept hitting dead ends at every turn. But at the same time, those who had been working to clean out that vault became very sick, and not just physically. Now, I only learned about this when I tried to check in with others who had been in that vault. I found out that some of them had to be rushed to a hospital, and others I couldn't even get a hold of. Now, I'm not going to lie, that really freaked me out. Because I'd been in that vault too. Did that mean I was in danger? Now, in hindsight, that should have been a sign. I should have left right then and there. But, whether by luck, fluke, or coincidence, I found something. Or maybe it would be more accurate to say, something found me. This old German woman, who never gave me her name, she claimed to be the result of an affair, one between a German woman and a member of the Dark Moon unit. Her mother, who she did not name, claimed to have stolen records that were given to her by the same man who impregnated her. Now, naturally, I was skeptical. This woman did not come off as entirely stable. In fact, she claimed that she never left her home village for her entire life. She only sought me out because she saw the news about the uncovered vault. She went so far as to claim that doing so had already awoken something. She didn't say what it was. She just said that whatever it was, it didn't care that the war was over. It was going to resume its mission. Now, at that point, I definitely questioned the woman's sanity. But between burning curiosity and a newfound sense of urgency, I followed her. She eventually led me to her village, which looked like it hadn't changed much since the end of the war. She then brought me into her house, opened a heavy safe that had been built into the wall, and gave me a stack of dusty old documents.
Take them. Burn them for all I care. It no longer matters.
She left me to look over them right there in the kitchen. I don't entirely remember what she did after that. She just went to her room, closed the door, and... I'm getting ahead of myself. But what I learned from those documents she gave me, it revealed the true scope and horror of Project Phantom Cold. The overarching goal of the project was simple: find new, more effective ways of killing Germany's enemies. But instead of guns, bombs, or bullets, Project Phantom Cold sought to use occult practices to weaponize the spirits of the dead themselves. The idea was to create an army of Geister Eternatars, or ghost assassins in German. They figured the Allies couldn't kill an enemy that was already dead. Yeah, I know it sounds absurd. Even the men of the Dark Moon unit thought it was crazy. But in later reports, there was no doubt in their words. They had seen things, witnessed things, fought things that left them deeply disturbed. And keep in mind, these were hardened soldiers, elite special forces units trained to handle anything. But no amount of training could have prepared them for this. The initial reconnaissance reports described strange gusts of wind coming from the manor, followed by these glowing lights that resembled balls of lightning. Another report says the soldiers and researchers there were in high spirits. They seemed to believe that they had made a breakthrough. One even claimed that Project Phantom Cold was about to turn the tide of the war. But that was when the Dark Moon unit acted. The details from here on out get a lot less concise. Near as I can tell, the men broke into the facility under the cover of darkness and with a winter storm bearing down on them. There was gunfire, fighting, and quite a few profanities exchanged. The original plan was just to sabotage the project. Now, the entire unit was intent on destroying it. Allied High Command wanted them to take back anything of value to France, but every soldier in the Dark Moon unit agreed to disobey that order. And as a soldier myself, trust me when I say that's not something to take lightly. In piecing together the rest of the reports, I can surmise that everyone in the unit agreed to burn the manor to the ground. They were going to completely bury Project Phantom Cold forever. That effort actually resulted in even more casualties. In the end, only half of the Dark Moon unit survived. But even though they succeeded in destroying the manor and killing all the researchers present, they did not consider their mission a total success. One particular note, which was not on official military stationery, had what looked like scribbles from the unit commander. I think he was trying to say something, to send a message that couldn't be included in the report. The first page actually read something like this: "The ghost, killer, so angry. We stopped the program before they could train it. We managed to contain him, found a vault in the manor. We lured it there, put everything in there documenting our mission. Whatever happens with this war, keep the vault sealed. Do not let it out. We tried to destroy it, but..." That man, according to the other records I went over earlier, died before escaping Germany. Officially, he and the other casualties were listed as killed in action. The reports they gave Allied Command were skewed and redacted. I can't imagine they wanted to tell them the entire truth. The only reason the records I found survived is because one of the soldiers in the Dark Moon unit saved some. He gave them to the woman he had an affair with. That woman had actually been married to one of the German officers at that manor. She worried she might end up being charged with the deaths of all the villagers. In these documents, they were supposed to act as leverage if those consequences ever came. That never happened, but she still held on to them. And she told her daughter to keep them, if only to preserve the memory of her father. Her daughter admitted outright that had been a mistake. Every mention of Project Phantom Cold should have been purged from all records. And those are her words, not mine. It left me in a conflicted state after I finished going over them. But that mention of the vault, that urging to keep it sealed, that filled me with a special kind of dread. It reminded me that those who'd been inside had fallen ill. Now, I suspected what they experienced, it was no illness. I just kept asking myself, did we just unwittingly free a killer ghost? A phantom assassin that could kill us? It was a terrifying prospect. With these records in hand, I tried to find the woman again, hoping she had more. But when I went into her room, oh my God, what I saw, it made the horror in those reports all too real. She'd just been lying in her bed, curled up in a fetal position, as if she'd been waiting for it. And it eventually came. Because that room, it felt as cold as a meat locker when I entered. And her face, her terrified, frozen face, even if she expected it, it still filled her with a cold, deadly horror. I left that place as fast as I could. I left Germany as fast as I could. I made it home, but I swear, I felt it was stalking me, taunting me. Every slight chill I felt, every twinge of cold, it filled me with so much fear. I ended up having a few breakdowns. Even as others who had been in that vault died under unknown circumstances, as they called it, no one would listen. No one believed me. Perhaps it's already too late. That thing, that ghost assassin, it doesn't care that the war is over. This abomination that came out of the horrors of war, it's out there now. It's on a mission and, oh, so cold. Getting so cold. I need to get this warning out there. So cold.